Welcome to Books versus Movies, the podcast where I set out to answer the age-old question, is the book really always better than the movie? I'm Yuvia, an actress and book lover based out of New York City, and today I will be discussing Farewell My Queen by Chantal Thomas and its 2012 adaptation, Farewell My Queen, starring Seydoux and Diane Kruger. Hi everyone, how are you? Good to see you. So I'm expecting this episode to also be short and sweet because there isn't much to say about the book or the film other than they're both really slow. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So Farewell My Queen by Chantal Thomas, and translated, so this was originally published in French, translated by Moishi Black. Shout out to my friend Moshi. Obviously, he's not the same Moshi that translated this, but I don't see that name very often. So anyway, translated by Moishi Black. Tells the story of Agathe-Sidonie Laborde, and I know how to pronounce Agathe, thanks to, we actually had one of our international students that we had last year. Her name was Agathe, and she's the one that taught us how to pronounce it. So anyway, Agathe-Sidonie Laborde is essentially hired as the Queen's reader. So she does read to Queen Marie Antoinette. We start off in the future where she's now lived in Vienna for many years before we flash back to July 14th, 15th, and 16th of 1789, and we kind of get an inside glimpse into the start of the French Revolution. So what happened during those days is that the Bastille falls or is overtaken by the French citizens who are tired of the French monarchy, essentially. And that's just very simple layman's terms. Obviously, there's more complicated things. But anyway, so we get an inside look as to what happened in Versailles the day that the Bastille fell and the 2 days immediately after. The 2012 adaptation Farewell My Queen stars Seydoux and Diane Kruger, and it focuses on the platonic relationship between Marie Antoinette and her reader during the first days of the French Revolution. So it is a pretty faithful adaptation. There are some differences as always, but for the most part, pretty faithful, nothing much to add. The biggest change is probably that of Louison, who is also she's not one of the readers, but she is one of like the ladies in waiting to the Queen. She does not exist in the book, or she does, it's very minor, briefly mentioned, does not play as big a role as she does in the film. So in the film, we focus a lot on this beautiful clock that is, it's just this stark contrast to Agathe-Sidoney's very bare room. Obviously, as servants, they live in minimally furnished rooms with the tiniest of windows and the barest of beds and things like that. So it stands out in stark contrast because it's like this beautiful, elaborate clock that was actually loaned out to her by the Queen's lady in waiting to make sure that Agathe gets up on time and reports to the Queen on time, because she does have a tendency to be late. So Louison, who is one of Agathe's friends, she is obsessed with this clock, obviously, and wants to look at it and be around it all the time. And at one point, Agathe lets Louison borrow it. It's kind of one of those like tit for tat kind of situations. Like she really needs a favor like immediately from Louison, and Louison's like, I'll do it if you loan me the clock. So she loans Louison the clock, and at one point on the second day of the invasion, Louison escapes with one of the soldiers. So instead of battling, this soldier essentially leaves, and he and Louison are having an affair, so they leave together, and Louison steals the clock, and Agathe needs to explain to the lady in waiting what happened to the clock. And of course, like, she gets in trouble, but there's more pressing matters than finding out what happened to this clock. That does not happen at all in the book. There's no Louison, there's no clock. Yeah, completely made up for the film. Another change is that Agathe is very skilled at embroidery, and this is mentioned in the book, but it's just mentioned. And in the film, the lady-in-waiting tasks Agathe with sewing a dahlia, or embroidering a dahlia for the queen to have as a keepsake. And she gives, so the queen obviously is not very interested in literature. Like, she lets the reader read to her, but most of the time she ends up canceling or stopping her from reading anything of substance, and essentially directs her to read about, I guess, the equivalent of like the fashion magazines of the time period. And so she has like this huge album of just like different pages of like the fashion of the time, and it's very precious to her. So the lady-in-waiting lets Agathe take that book and see the particular dahlia that the queen loves so that she's able to embroider it. And she does. And then that's like the last thing she gives the queen before she needs to flee. But that's it. By the time she needs to flee, it's kind of like, oh, thank you for sewing this. I don't really care because crap's about to go down. French Revolution is starting. But again, that also does not happen in the book. The lady-in-waiting is also plays a much more prominent role in the film than she does in the book. She is very like on top of what Agathe is doing, does not let anything, like nothing slides by her. There's one brief moment in which the queen asks to speak to Agathe privately, and Agathe takes great pleasure in like closing the doors on the lady-in-waiting's face. That again does not happen in the book. There's a lot of things that happen in the film that do not happen in the book, as you can probably tell. So that is it, really. Everything else is pretty similar. So yeah, how do I feel about both? So I think the thing that was most irritating to me about the film was that the main focus of the story is Agathe and Marie Antoinette. Great. And then about like in the last third of the film, like we start getting focused on Gabrielle de Polignac. So we are introduced to her a little bit earlier in the film, but there's not too much emphasis placed on her other than Agathe feeling a little bit of jealousy towards her because she was reality the rumored girlfriend of the queen. In the film, they don't make it a rumor, like they do make it official that they're in love with each other. And so towards the end of the film, like we're introduced to her, and then whatever, we get lost in the action of everything that's going on at Versailles as a list comes out of everyone that the citizens of France want to execute, with the royals obviously being towards the top of the list. And yeah, there's just a lot of chaos, people fleeing the castle, and Gabrielle de Polignac, because of that rumored relationship with the queen, is on that list. The queen wants to protect her because she loves her, and so she asks Agathe to pretend she's Gabrielle de Polignac, and Gabrielle will pretend that she's Gabrielle's lady-in-waiting. Hopefully that made sense. So Agathe is pretending to be Gabrielle, who's pretending to be Gabrielle's lady-in-waiting. So, and that is the plan, to get Gabrielle safely out of France. They're exiled, or they're going to be exiled, essentially. Once they leave, they can't come back. But in order to protect Gabrielle's life, it's kind of like, Agathe, you're going to pretend to be Gabrielle. That way, if you're captured, they'll kill you and she'll still be alive, because they have no reason to kill the lady-in-waiting. And so they trade places and they make it out of France safely. And then as the film ends, we see them escaping, and then we get like the epilogue in letters or in words, basically saying like Gabrielle de Polignac escaped and she lived out the rest of her days in sadness, and it's said that she died of a broken heart because she was separated from her one true love. Which, the reason that irritated me was just like, that kind of came out of nowhere. Like I said, the focus up and for the first 2/3 of the film was the relationship between Agathe and Marie Antoinette, and kind of like Agathe Agathe's obsession with the queen. We kind of get the sense that she has a crush on the queen, like obviously this unrequited crush, and she's infatuated and wants to do everything to please her queen, and her queen could give two craps about her. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is my girlfriend that I love and I want her to live, so you're gonna trade places. And then the epilogue focuses on Gabrielle de Polignac as opposed to Agathe. And I understand that Gabrielle was a real person and Agathe was more than likely made up for the book / film, but then make this story about Marie and Gabrielle. Don't make it about Agathe and Marie. But anyway, so that's kind of what just really irritated me about the film, is that we're following this journey of this one character and then we end up not knowing what happens to her. Presumably there's one moment in which they get stopped and then nothing happens and they're allowed to go on their way, so presumably she makes it out of France alive. But I mean, that's who I care about. That's who the film wanted me to care about, up until out of nowhere they wanted me to care about someone else. So that was what kind of irritated me about the film. What irritated me about the book was just that nothing really happens. Now granted, nothing really happens in the film. That was Orlando's so game to watch anything with me, and he was kind of like, nothing really happened, and I was like, no, not really. And it's one of those things where, like, I wasn't a huge fan of the film, and overall films where quote unquote nothing happens don't bother me. I watch films for the storytelling, the art, the acting, all of that. So sometimes I watch films for the mindless entertainment, and sometimes I watch it for the more cinematic aspects of film. So the fact that nothing really happened didn't bother me per se, but it also just wasn't very interesting. Like, this film was just not very interesting overall. The book was even worse. Like, nothing, when I say nothing happens in the book, I mean nothing happens in the book. Everything that I just said, it does happen. Like, she is approached by the queen and she's tasked with changing places with Gabrielle, and she does, and they escape. But these are supposedly 3 of the most tense days to have for someone to have experienced living in the royal courts, whether you were part of royalty or not, because there was, I got the impression that the citizens were also targeting some of the people that worked there because they worked there. But it had to be like for a good reason. If you were just like trying to pay the bills, they weren't targeting you. But it's very, like, the Bastille has fallen, and now there's a list of 200 people that the citizens want to execute, and people need to escape. Some of the royals, yes, but some of the lesser royals, I don't know what they're called. They're not like the main royals, but they're like technically royalty, but like they're not at the same time. Like, if something happens to them, nothing happens to like the line of succession or anything, but they're still like dukes, like the dukes and duchesses, like like, yes, they are royalty, but like people don't care about them as much. You know, that's kind of what I'm trying to say. So it's very, very tense, and people are scared for their lives. And meanwhile, the book is kind of just like, I woke up and I went to the queen and I read to her, and then I went to go talk to my friend to find out what was going on, and he told me, and then I went to bed, and then I woke up the next day. Like, it's just so slow, and I was like, where is the sense of urgency? These are like, your lives are potentially in danger and you don't seem to care. Like, you don't seem to care. So I will say the film definitely added a lot more of that tension, which, like, I know Orlando's gonna be listening to this and being like, it did? It's like, yeah, it did. You felt a lot more of the tension in the film than you did reading the book. In the book, it was just, I'm not even joking when I'm saying it was like that. I was like, people are in danger. I 100% cannot tell. Okay, sure. Sure, Jan. Yeah, so there's that. And then, so in the film, as Marie Antoinette tells her lady in waiting, like, go get Agathe, this is what I'm going to ask of her. The lady in waiting goes to get Agathe, and she says, listen, the queen is going to ask something of you. You should say no. Honestly, like, you should say no. But Agathe does it because she's infatuated, possibly in love with the queen. That also doesn't happen in the book. Like, she's summoned, but the lady in waiting doesn't warn her. She is a little bit scared in the film to do it. And in the book, she's kind of like, yeah, all right. Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, that's fine. What are we gonna have for lunch today? Like, she's just so calm about the whole thing, which is not very interesting to read. And then I also didn't get that kind of sexual tension that Agathe feels for the queen that I was getting in the film. Like, in the film, it was very obvious, like, ooh, this girl, like, has it bad for the queen. And it's not a sense of like, I'm a loyal citizen. It's she's got it bad. So there was none of that in the book either. In the book, she was very much just a loyal citizen. That was like, whatever my queen tells me to do, I will do because I follow her faithfully. And that's it. That's farewell, my queen. There's really nothing to it. There's nothing really exciting about it. And yeah, it was what it was. One thing I did discover that I found really interesting is that Diane Kruger, who plays Marie Antoinette, actually speaks. So this film is a French film. So if you do watch it, you will have to read subtitles, which, just PSA, do not let subtitles deter you from enjoying a really great film. This may not be the film for you, but just in general, like, stop discrediting foreign films just because you have to read a little bit to understand what's going on. You're missing out on some great films by doing that. But anyway, I found out that Diane Kruger was actually speaking French with a German/Austrian accent, which is more than likely how Marie Antoinette herself spoke French since she was born in Austria. So that was just a fun little fact that obviously I would never have known just by watching the film because I don't speak French. And so yeah, definitely not going to be able to pick up on the different accents. But I mean, Diane Kruger was good, and she wasn't bad by any means. She just wasn't memorable to me, but I don't necessarily think it was her acting choices. I think it was just, I didn't find the character that interesting, which is interesting considering it's Marie Antoinette. Anyway, Léa Seydoux was really, really good. I'd never seen her act before. I'd obviously heard her name because of Blue is the Warmest Color, which is kind of the film that launched her to stardom, at least in the US. And yeah, so she was great. Overall, well, let's go ahead and get into the rating, even though I think you know what the winner is. The winner is the film. I didn't tell you what I rated them, but I rated them both 3 stars. The book is probably more like a 2.5, 2.75, maybe a little bit less than a 3. If not, it's a solid 3, but definitely not a tie between the two. They were both just okay. Nothing exciting, like I said, that really happens in either one, but the film does have those little extra touches of that unrequited sexual attention between Agathe and Marie, and the overall tension of the fact that, hey, there's stuff actually going down and our lives are in danger and we're kind of screwed. So we kind of need to leave now or face the consequences of our bad ruling. So yeah, that was good. And I think the other reason I was kind of annoyed by the film, going back to that a little bit more, is because even like the poster, like the film poster, is Marie Antoinette and Gabrielle de Polignac hugging each other, looking at each other in the eyes tenderly, and Léa Seydoux in the background, just kind of looking at this display of affection kind of disappointingly. And so you see this film poster and you're expecting like this love story or this possible like secret love story between Marie Antoinette and another woman, and you don't get that. Like, the poster, even the poster wants you to think Gabrielle de Polignac plays a bigger role in the film than Agathe does, and Agathe is by far like clearly the protagonist of the film. Like, it's not even like she is the lead and Marie Antoinette is supporting, and then Gabrielle is like supporting. That's not a thing, but I'm gonna call it that just to tell you how important Gabrielle is to the film. And yet she's the focus of the poster and the focus of the epilogue. It's like, if you wanted me to care about her, you should have just made it about the two of them and had Agathe be the supporting. But anyway, that is it for this episode of Books versus Movies. If you liked this episode, please leave it a rating and a review and tell all your friends about it, because I really want to grow this little community that I have come to care for so much. Next time, I will be talking about White Bird in a Blizzard by Laura Kasich. I will look up how to pronounce that next time. But White Bird in a Blizzard by Laura Kasich, and it's 2014 adaptation White Bird in a Blizzard starring Shailene Woodley and Eva Green. See you next time.